should say now that the author of a new book called Home Ecology is Karen Christensen. She lives in London, where she, for instance, has organic vegetables delivered weekly and has rid her home of bleaches, perfumes and tin cans. But how did she know what to do? Well, television certainly didn't help when she chose to change her lifestyle.
I suppose I started because when I was pregnant, my own health became important, not just for me, but for the baby I was carrying. And then after he was born, I looked at him, you know, and he was so beautiful and so fresh and new. I was listening to, you know, the news. You hear programs about the environment, things that are going to happen in 20 years and 40 years. The ozone layers is breaking up. Acid rain is destroying forests. You start to think about the kind of world your child is going to grow up in.
It's not the first time that a ship laden with toxic waste has roamed the high seas in search of a friendly port. In May, the ship Zenubia, with 2,000 tons of chemical waste on board, searched for months for somewhere to take its cargo.
TV gives people lots of information about the problems. It's very good on that, but so little about the solutions, or at least the part that we can all play in solving them. Unfortunately, often TV shows us the things that we're losing or that are near to extinction, which is all very well. I mean, it's very interesting, but is that really what we want to do, is to look at this thing and say, this may be our last chance?
Imagine discovering a small fire in your lounge. It's only been burning for a minute or so. Perhaps you think you can tackle it. The first reaction might be to dash to the kitchen for a bucket of water. If it took you 40 seconds, you'd return to an inferno. The intense heat and poisonous fumes coming from the foam filling would leave you little chance of survival.
TV could do so much, because if it doesn't, you see, what we learn from TV is what we learn from, what we learn about domestic things is what we learn from commercials, because domestic things aren't considered important enough to talk about on TV. So the only domestic things that we see are advertisements. And advertisers are going to tell us what they like about their product. You don't get the other view.
For the past 10 years, samples of seawater taken at the resort have failed to meet EC standards. Hardly surprising when 50 million gallons of liquidized sewage are dumped half a mile out to sea every single day.
Well, yes, we like to think of her as an organic baby. She's breastfed now, because she's only 2 months old. And she wears real nappies, I suppose. And she won't have Tinder packaged food. We have to do something now if we're going to give our kids, if Rachel's going to have a future, a good future, the kind of future every parent wants to give their children.
So basically, Chris and Bernadette, the point that Karen is making there is that we can find out how to save the whale and whatever, but we don't know what happens when we flush the loos, as you were saying to me there. Is that a fair criticism?
Yes, I think it is, and I think what we need to make sure people understand is that there's a connection between the two things. There's a temptation to think that the real environmental issues happen in tropical rainforests at the other end of the world, and that they've really got very little to do with whether you switch the light off in the evening, you know. But in fact, the connections are there, and things like acid rain have helped to begin to make the connections that if we all insulated our homes properly, we would use 4 less power stations in Britain, and we now do understand that the power stations in producing our electricity are actually adding to the global heating, the greenhouse effect, and killing trees in Scandinavia. So people are beginning to make the connection.